an overview of what the issues are and why we're looking at tolling in EJ. I'm going to just tell you a little bit about where we are right now in the practice. And I will admit that we're kind of on a learning curve with this. We've only been dealing with it for a relatively limited period of time, and we're still working out what the best ways of doing it are. So what I'm going to talk to you mostly about is our joint guidance that we developed together with FHWA. It came out in April of 2009, and this is kind of the compendium of the practices that we're using right now. It kind of incorporates what our original guidance when we first started grappling with this issue was on environmental justice for toll roads. It brings some of that in. It brings in some of the lessons we've learned, some of the FHWA comments and recommendations that we received between the time that originally came out in 2005 and the time we issued this in 2009. And it kind of reflects where our current practices have gone. One of the major changes between this and the 2005 guidance was that we suddenly had to start dealing with something that we hadn't considered initially. And that was, first we thought about, okay, tolling, if we have to look at it as an impact, it's an impact on a per project basis. What we started having were a lot of areas, most of our metropolitan areas, and it really kind of first showed up in Dallas, and it's happened in Houston, and I think it's going in Austin, and most of our major metro areas are now dealing with the concept of systems. And so what we're really looking at is we're looking at two levels of analysis on many of these projects. There's the project-by-project analysis that's going to happen every time, but in major metro areas where you have whole systems of toll roads being built in a relatively short period of time, we have to look at the impacts on more of a system-wide level. How is it affecting the community as a whole? Because we're not talking necessarily about one project. We're talking about, in the space of 5, 10, 15 years, many projects across an entire community that may change the way people travel throughout the entire community and not just in the local area. So there's really two kinds of ways of looking at it, and the aspects of impacts that we look at are really pretty similar, but we're looking at it on two levels. So keep in mind that we're looking at both. We're looking at what's happening for this specific project, and then what's happening community-wide in those areas where you have these large systems of toll roads developing. And I should probably mention that by toll roads in this case, it's not just traditional toll roads. We're looking at anything with a toll element, which may be a toll road, it may be a hot lane, it may be a managed lane, anything where there's a fee for use, essentially. If you pull up the joint guidance, you're going to see, 2 or 3 pages of bullet points of things you have to discuss. It really all comes down to 3 major elements. The first one is you're looking at who is using the facility and what are their choices. As Sarah was saying, tolling doesn't necessarily just affect people who are geographically in proximity to the facility. It affects the people who are using the facility. So one of the major things that we have to do to analyze those impacts is figure out, well, who is using the facility? Do we know? And what are their choices? Are we talking about a tolled lane with other express lanes nearby that are untolled? Are we talking about a traditional toll road where there are no parallel access roads or other free express lanes? What are the combinations, and what are the non-tolled routes that are available to people? What are the choices that we're really offering, and how do those choices affect how people are impacted? The next major element deals with accessibility policies and collection methods. And a lot of this goes back to many of the things that Sarah was mentioning. What we're looking at is what are the policies as far as where is any excess toll revenue going? What kind of projects are we funding with it? How easy is it for people to get a toll tag? I mean, partly that's do they have a credit card or not? What are their other options? How far do they have to go to get one if they need to? And what are the choices for how they pay for it? How much more does it cost if they don't have a toll tag? Those kind of things, because that really really can have an impact on how accessible the lanes are to those people. We can also talk a little bit about actual access, where are the ramps located and things like that, but mostly what we're looking at in this case is can people really get what they need to get in order to get onto that road? And it feeds very well into the third piece, which is we're looking at an economic analysis. And what we're doing right now for economic analysis is very, very simple. We just come up with a reasonable scenario. How often is somebody likely to use this road? Say they're using it on a daily commute. How many times a year would they use it? If they used it every day, how much would that cost? And then by way of comparison, so if we're talking about a person of low income, what percentage of their income is it versus someone of maybe the median income in a community or a higher income? So we're looking at kind of that differential effect by, we're talking about a larger chunk of somebody's available money if they have smaller available money to begin with. So we look at those percentages of income as a method of saying how much more it may affect somebody with less money available. The other major element that we have built into our current guidance is flexibility. As I mentioned, I think we're all pretty much in agreement that we're still learning, and the methods that we have right now are the best that have been developed so far, but we know that that's not the only way of looking at the issue. It's not necessarily the best way of looking at the issue, it's the best that we've figured out so far. There's a lot of variability across the state in terms of what information is even available. We tend to rely a lot on our NPOs for modeling, which is great in areas like Dallas or Houston, but some of the NPOs, particularly when we start getting into more rural areas, don't have the same modeling capabilities, they don't have the same staffing levels. It's much more difficult for them to do the same kind of analysis, so we can't have a one-size-fits-all approach. So there's a lot of flexibility built into the guidance. There's a lot of places where it kind of says, well, if you have another idea, coordinate with ENB and FHWA and we'll figure out if we can use that idea, and maybe that would be a better way of approaching it. So there's still a lot of flexibility. We can make new methods all the time. And so we have some research going on into what kind of methods might be better in the future for looking at these issues. And Yolanda will come up and tell you a little bit about what she's been doing and where things may go in the future.